Managing and Other Lies is a 2024 queer horror short story collection by Willow Heath. This is her first short story collection. I believe she's only ever published poetry before this. At least that's what it sounded like from reading about the author section at the end. But yeah. First off, big fan of Willow's channel on YouTube, Willow Talks Books. That's the only reason that I knew about this book, and I'm such a fan of the channel, I decided to buy her book. I've never read a book by a YouTuber before, because I'm always a little scared too, worried that the quality isn't going to be that great, and that's going to affect my opinion of their videos, which it shouldn't, but I'm always worried about that happening. But Willow does such thoughtful, well-written videos and blog posts and stuff that I figured I should give her book a try. So I picked it up and read it. I believe there are 6 stories in here. I might be a little bit off there, but like I said, they are all centering around queer themes, namely, for the most part, gender identity, and overall, I really enjoyed the book. As with any short story collection, I enjoyed some stories more than others, but I am happy to say that I did at least overall enjoy each individual story in this book, which is kind of rare for a short story collection, especially by one author, for me at least. Friday Black, for example, is a book that I read earlier this year that had some fantastic stories and 1 or 2 stories that I really just didn't like. But I liked all of the stories in this book, which is good. My favorites are probably Managing, the first and titular story, and then Baby and Little Blue Sticky Notes, which are the 2 last stories. Those 3 were probably my favorite. In all of these stories, Willow goes with a kind of atmospheric, gothic style. There aren't many, visceral scares, if that makes sense. No jump scares or anything like that. It's definitely more bubbling horror beneath the surface. Very much a cold atmosphere in most of the stories. And so it's not necessarily like horror in a way that will make you, scream and tremble and curl up under the sheets. It's more horror that is upsetting and sometimes disturbing, actually. I was surprised that I was expecting body horror because a lot of the stories center around transgender themes and blanking on the term right now, but when your identity of yourself doesn't match the body that you're in, themes like that. So I was expecting body horror for sure, but oh man, is there some fucked up stuff that happens in some of these stories. And there's also a lot of sexual and borderline erotic things going on. I say borderline because they're not very arousing. They're really just upsetting, but also very sexual. Mixing of sex and horror. So yeah, just a lot of disturbing stuff in here for sure. The first story, Managing, is about almost half the book. It's like 80 pages. And it's just a home run. I really love that story. And then the other two I mentioned, Baby and Little Blue Sticky Notes, are much shorter but still very effective. Little Blue Sticky Notes is kind of the most classic horror feeling story, to me at least. And Baby has some like kind of Lovecraftian themes almost, or not Lovecraftian themes, but Lovecraftian imagery in the monster in that story, which I will not spoil. And Managing, the big one, we follow somebody who has been hired as a caretaker for a sprawling Gothic mansion, and they're also kind of a bit on a journey to discover themselves, a gender journey, and so those two things kind of weave into each other, and there's some major body horror and sexual horror going on in that story. I just got chills and goosebumps, and it was not because of the wind up here. It was just thinking about a couple things in that story. And then the others, I'm going to have to look at the titles here. Chloe Claire 1. It's spelled out as like a username, and it's a horror about sort of parasocial relationships and domestic abuse, and the way that maybe on the internet people you interact with may not that interaction may or may not be healthy for them or for the content creator as well. The next one's called A Mother's Love, and it's written out as a play with director's notes, which is very interesting. That's something that I do like about this collection, is every story is written differently with a different narrative device or framing, or you might say gimmick to each different story. A Mother's Love is written as a play, and it is a trans person going to visit their mother, and who doesn't accept their identity, and of course some horrifying and supernatural things also happen that are tied to this event of her visiting her mother. This one was pretty freaky. I won't go into detail. There is a presence in the house that is very upsetting. That one was good as well. And then the next story is We Understand Each Other Perfectly. Ooh, there's a hawk. I have to pause to admire the hawk. Wow, that thing's beautiful. It's huge. Bright white feathers underneath, with black wingtips and a brown gold back. Just kind of hovering. Cool. Well, I have a friend with me in this video. Anyway, where was I? So We Understand Each Other Perfectly. The main character is running away from home, a home that, again, doesn't accept their identity, and is hitchhiking and gets picked up by a friendly stranger who seems to be very similar to the main character in a lot of ways, but that maybe doesn't end up being what it seems, that dynamic between the two of them. And so you'll have to read to figure out what happens there. And then in Baby, there's a couple having a baby, or there's a couple with a baby, I guess, who is very sickly, and their sickness may be due to something with the parents. And what happens next is out there. I was not expecting it at all. Probably one of the reasons it's my favorites is because it just goes into a dark, insane situation. So Baby's very good. And then Little Blue Sticky Notes, a woman is grieving her recently deceased spouse who was abusive towards her, and so it's a very complicated grieving process, and she decides to keep her stuff, get rid of his stuff, and move, just kind of get a new, she apparently can't afford their house anymore anyway, but she also just wants to leave that awful abusive life behind. And so she marks all of her deceased husband's belongings with little blue sticky notes, so that they are thrown away and her stuff is kept for the move. But that abusive past ends up following her in maybe unexpected ways and haunting her in unexpected ways. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of all the stories. I didn't really need to go into the synopses of every single story, but I wanted to because I liked all of them so much. I think it's definitely worth reading. I think you should definitely look up content warnings for this. I don't normally mention that when I'm talking about books, because I figure, people should be looking up those things and researching those things on their own before they consume different kinds of media, especially if there is some topic that you really just don't want to see. But for this one, this is one of the few books or TV shows or movies, few pieces of media that has made me squirm and made me uncomfortable. I don't typically look up content warnings for things before I watch them or read them. And I'm not necessarily saying I wish I had for this, but I'm just saying for me, if it made me kind of squirm, a little squeamish, then I just want to throw out there that you definitely want to look up content warnings before you read this one, if you are sensitive to certain things, so that you know what you're getting into. But yeah, overall, great book, highly recommend. It is, I think, self-published, and so it's not. And Willow Heath is a UK author. So here in the States, I think the only way to really get it is on Amazon. But yeah, I would very much recommend this. Managing and Other Lies, Willow Heath. If you liked this review, hit the like button. If you didn't like it, hit the dislike button. If you've read this, let me know your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more. I will see you next time.